There's a story that when Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement in the West, was a young man, and he was living in Prayagraj, living in Allahabad, which is the Muslim name for the city of Prayag, a famous city at the confluence of the Ganga and the Yamuna rivers. And the Saraswati also was there at one point, but it's long since dried up. So these three extremely holy rivers in ancient India, actually the name India comes from the Indus River, which was the Greek name for the Sindhu River, which is, the Saraswati and the Sindhu River form natural borders of a civilization, Mohenjo-Daro civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, that is one of the, quite early civilizations on the planet, subject of extensive archaeological study for, well over 100 years now. So the rivers are critical. If you look at, like, you got the Tigris and the Euphrates River for Persian civilization. You've got the Jordan River, which is also there for the Jewish tradition as well as Christianity. You know how they say, I looked over Jordan? They mean the Jordan River. And so, of course, you've got the Amazon, you got the Nile, and you just, look at any big civilization anywhere in the world, they flourish on the bank of a river. Interestingly, the Delta blues, the blues music of the Black community, post-slavery, post-slavery, that's influenced so much of modern music, pop music, rock and roll, and everything else. That flourished on I believe it's definitely the Mississippi, and then it was also, there's another river, it's not the Missouri, but there's another river there, and it's the area, the alluvial plains in between those two rivers was the most fertile soil in all of the US, which is where they had so many plantations, and therefore there were so many slaves there, and therefore their music came from that place. So you look at any civilization, good or bad, in between any great civilization, and you find that this side of a riverbank, even Megasthenes, the Greek ambassador to India 2,500 years ago, right around the time of Buddha, writes about sitting on the bank of the Ganga next to these shaven-headed sadhus and studying philosophy. So you get this even when, whether it's travelers or ambassadors, or you look at the archaeological evidence of great civilizations, or you look at the history of the world, you find that riverbanks are where it's at. And it's pretty easy to figure out why that would be the case. They facilitate travel. They give you a good source of water. And then the water ends up seeping into the soil around the river, and that soil becomes extremely fertile. Do you guys follow that? So yeah, the Gangetic plain was the source of that was, where the Aryans flourished in the Vedic civilization. And Sindhu Saraswat civilization, which is also called the Indus Valley civilization. The very name India, the very name Hindu, comes from the Sindh River. So there's one place, it's the Prayag, and it's where three rivers come together. One of them, the Saraswati, has been dried up for thousands of years now. But that Prayagraj is these three rivers where they confluence. That's the source, it's the place of the Kumbh Mela. the largest religious gathering in the world. Every 12 years, the Kumbh Melas in Allahabad and Prayag. That's it. There's different melas they have throughout the years, but there's the big one, and that's the Kumbh Mela in Prayag. It might not even be every 12 years. It might be less than every 12 years. They do it in Hardwar. They do it in different places. I think it's in Prayag every 12 years. And so Prabhupada was living there. And he was a pharmacist. And he had a friend. His friend was a big Sanskrit pundit. At that time, he was just a student. His name was O. Bihari Lal Kapoor. He was a Sanskrit student, a philosophy student. This would be going back to the 40s, the 1940s. So, World War II-ish. And he asked, it might have even been the late 30s. And he asked Prabhupada, he said, "Oh, you're a pharmacist. Can you give me the formula for love of God?" Now, this question, you got to have a little bit of background information to appreciate the significance of the question. Love of God is our goal in our tradition. So it's our nirvana, our satori, our salvation, our liberation, our heaven, etc., our zenith, our apex. And so Krishna prema, love of Krishna, is the stated goal of our tradition. In our tradition. Like, you never find the word Hindu used in our texts when we're talking to each other. The word Hindu does not exist. It's an outsider's term. It's a term given by outsiders. Not actually Muslim invaders, but rather Persian traders. Significantly before Muhammad, the term was being used by traders to refer to the people who lived in India, lived on the bank of the Sindh River, which became the Hind River because the sibilant isn't so easy to pronounce in some cultures. And so they called those people Hindus. It was a term from outsiders, not a disparaging term, but a geographical term to indicate where a group of people lived. The term was then eventually used and adopted by Muslims to refer to the Indians who they subjugated. Nice to see you. Who they subjugated for near 1,000 years. You never find the word Hindu used by Hindus in their own texts when they're talking to each other. I know it's going to freak out all you Jai Hind people, but the thing is, you're really young and you don't necessarily know the history of the term. So even though you might have been raised with it, it doesn't mean it was always like that. It just means it was like that in the 50s when you were born. Did you follow that? If you want to find out what things were like a few hundred years ago, you have to go back a few hundred years in the literature. And if you have some gray hair and you're old, you can't be that old, because you're not going to be more than about 70 or 80 years old. And so all you can attest to from your childhood is what things were like at that point. Do you follow this? So anyway, if you look at medieval Sanskrit literature, medieval religious literature, what to speak of earlier, classical period literature or ancient literature, you never find the word Hindu used. You only find the word Hindu used in medieval texts when they're contrasting our tradition to the Muslims. It's a term which is used when our tradition was contrasting itself to the Muslim rulers who had subjugated the Indian people. Do you follow? So it does get used. It gets used in our medieval text, but it's only used when we're talking about our interactions with another community. Does that make sense? To give you an example, the term black is used by Black people to talk about themselves to each other. So that would not be a parallel phenomenon. Black people can very easily say, talk to somebody else about the Black experience, but that person's also Black, they're Black, and they're talking about their experience being Black people. Do you guys follow that? So that would not be a parallel term. You could take a term like Oriental. Oriental has kind of fallen by the wayside to Asian. And even Asian is a fairly poor term because Japan and China and different parts of China, what to speak of Southeast Asia, Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia, all of which have distinct cultures, what to speak of Myanmar and Malaysia and Singapore and the Philippines. All those, I mean, you start getting into a South Pacific thing at some point, maybe right around the Philippines, sort of the line of demarcation, when you get into a Pacific Islander phenomenon. But, you know, all those different groups of people used to be housed under one term. They were called Oriental. So you could imagine somebody from that part of the world 100 years ago, when Europeans or British academics used such poor terms of distinction, and they could say, oh yeah, I'm Oriental. They would never say that to somebody from China. They would say we're Chinese, or we speak Mandarin, or we speak Cantonese. You follow? Or we're from Qingdao, or we're from Taiwan, or we're from Vietnam or Laos. They would talk within their, or we're from the Khmer region, which is the old name for Cambodia, which was actually a Hindu civilization. Amazingly enough, Hinduism spread as far east as Cambodia. And there's a huge temple called Angkor Wat, the largest temple complex in the world, is a temple to Vishnu from the 12th century, from a Khmer king. So the term Oriental would have been used at certain points. People from China or Japan or various parts of the Orient, when talking to an ignorant person from outside who couldn't really appreciate the fine distinctions and the serious distinctions between the various cultures, they might just say, I'm Oriental. Actually, if you talk to somebody from India, there's a pretty big divide between South and North India. Then if you go and you're looking at North India, for instance, there's a pretty big divide between Punjabis and Gujaratis. They're very different. They have different languages. They might have some things in common, but they also have a lot of stuff that's different. And Gujus conceive of themselves as being Gujarati and also Indian, but they're from that part. It's not like that in the US. I don't think I'm a Californian. But if there was a Californian language, which was different than the Arizonian language, then our sense of cultural identity would be quite intimately linked to what state we were from. Of course, there are some places in the US where people do seriously identify with their state. Texas would be a classic example where people think of themselves as Texans first and United States people second. Americans actually somewhat disrespectful because Canada is in North America, as is Mexico. Central America and South America are also Americans. So for us to claim that term for ourselves, it's kind of like the opposite. It's like you say all these different cultures are Oriental or Asian, but then we're just one culture, the United States, and we're saying, oh, we get to claim the whole term American. You guys have to figure something else out for yourselves. Anyway, the term Hindu is only used to refer to ourselves in relationship to other heterodox groups, other distinct groups that we wish to contrast ourselves with. When speaking within our own tradition, we use other terms like Vaishnava and Shaiva, which designate the various schools within the somewhat clumsy term Hinduism, which doesn't really have a whole lot of meaning philosophically because you have distinct traditions that have, practically speaking, opposite beliefs, with beliefs sometimes housed within the one term Hinduism because it's more geographical than philosophical. For instance, if you go to South India and you talk to a Shaiva, they don't accept Gita. You may not know that. You would talk to a South Indian Shaiva, they don't accept Gita. Or you talk to even a Ramanuji, a Vaishnava from South India. They don't like the Bhagavatam. They don't study it. Rather, they study the Harivamsa, which is an appendix to the Mahabharata, which also tells the stories of Krishna. They prefer that text. That's what they quote from in their literature. That's what they quote from. So to an outsider, it might all appear to be the same thing, but there's actually any number of distinctions which you noted, which have been noted for thousands of years by people in the various tribes and within the various traditions of the somewhat clumsy umbrella term Hinduism. And we usually only use that term, like somebody might use the term Oriental when they're talking to an ignorant person from England who just doesn't even understand the Orient and the variety of cultures that's been flourishing there from when England was still, a bunch of, savages running around and beating each other with clubs. So you have to use that term out of consideration for the ignorance of the person you're talking to. Do you guys follow this? Anyway, within the wide tradition of Hinduism that houses so many different religions, within the Vaishnava cult tradition that we're a part of, which is by far the major tradition of Hinduism, 75% of Hindus professing to the Vaishnava faith. Within the Vaishnava tradition, you have sort of southern and northern elements. Within the northern element, and you're in the eastern seaboard now, you're in Gaudiya Desh. Within the Gaudiya tradition that we're a part of, our stated goal in our literature for a long time has been that we wish to achieve love of God. Going to heaven is not considered to be so significant because there's something in it for you. You're trying to get something for yourself. But loving Krishna, whether you're in heaven or hell, whether you go up or down, whether you live or die, whether in this world or the next world, whatever happens externally, loving Krishna is the goal of life. Selflessly loving Krishna, causelessly loving Krishna, loving Krishna just because. That is the stated unapologetic goal of our tradition when we're talking amongst ourselves. We might use more generic terms like mukti or moksha or stuff like that when we're talking siddha, something like that, siddhi when we're talking to people from outside. But when we're talking to our own tribe, within our own group, we use the term Krishna Prema, love for God. Please close that door for me. Thank you. You guys following us? So, to appreciate the statement that was made, you have to understand this point. And so, this Sanskrit student, who eventually became a very, very well-known philosopher who founded his own school, called the Oriental Research Institute, strangely enough. Even though it was specific to studying our tradition, he wanted to pick a generic name people would be able to appreciate. So he actually used the word Oriental, although, India's, I guess he called it the jewel of the Orient, but it's really like, it was really its own. You can see how foolish it is. Take Indian culture and Japanese culture and to refer to them under the same, you know what I mean? It's just like, what's wrong with people? Of course, the British and the French, they would be so offended. Their countries are so close to each other, but they would be so offended if you were to confuse them with the French and the Germans who share a border. But yeah, the whole Orient gets lumped together. So anyway, this student was meeting with Prabhupada, who was a pharmacist living in this holy city, Prayagraj, in the late 30s, perhaps early 40s. My guess would probably be it was the late 30s. And he said to Prabhupada, kind of cleverly, to appreciate the wittiness of it, you have to be a little bit familiar with Indian culture. But it would sound something like, oh, Abhay Babu, you are a pharmacist? You must be having so many formulas. You please tell me, what is the formula for Krishna praying? I wish to make the medicine so I can get love of God. You give me that formula, oh great pharmacist. Something like that. Appreciate how it might have played out when they were talking. And Prabhupada said, he asked Prabhupada for the elixir of Krishna praying. He wanted a tonic, because Prabhupada was famous for making tonics, Ayurvedic, homeopathic tonics and things like that. It was one of Prabhupada's hobbies. As a pharmacist, it makes sense, but he would have natural therapies he would offer, along with selling just the regular drugs that you find in any drugstore. Prabhupada would also sell natural medicines. Strange fact, not really a fun fact, but just an interesting fact. You can go to a pharmacy in India and get anything without a prescription. You can go to a pharmacy in India and be like, I'd like some morphine. I'll be okay, how much would you like? And they break out the morphine and give it to you. Give me some syringes too. And I'm like, okay, here you go. This idea that you need a prescription to get serious medication, prescription level medication, is not the case in India. You can just walk up to a pharmacy and get almost anything you want. You can also go down to Tijuana and buy almost anything over the counter as well. They also have, people in fact do this. They go and get stuff that they wouldn't be able to get, that they wouldn't normally have a prescription for, and they go down there to Mexico and they pick it up off the shelf in 5 seconds. Like I said, it's not really a fun fact, but it's just a small detail. So Prabhupada, in addition to selling the regular allopathic medicines that a pharmacist would sell, he also would make his own medicines. He made his own toothpaste. And he sold a book on Ganga Jal therapy, drinking Ganga water as like a cleanse. You know that master cleanse that you hear about? You've heard about that master cleanse? It's maple syrup and lemonade and cayenne pepper. Do you know where that comes from? You've heard of it, right? The master cleanse comes from India. It was sugarcane juice. You can get the book on it. The book's called The Master Cleanse. It was written like 50 years ago. The guy said, I went to India. They had sugarcane juice. They put lemon and cayenne pepper in it, which is very common. You get sugarcane juice. They'll give you a little heat with it, a little lemon with it. And they just juice it right there on the spot. They give you a cup of sugarcane juice. And he said, well, you can't get sugarcane juice in the West, so I substitute maple syrup because it has a similar glycemic index profile. The master cleanse is just what you get at your average sugarcane juice wall on the side of the road anywhere in India. They always offer you a little chili in there if you want it. They always offer you a little lemon. That's the master cleanse. So anyway, Prabhupada all had a gun, huh? Yeah, right? Yeah, no big deal, right? It's right there. Used to be kind of rough because they just had like some nasty cups, but nowadays they usually have paper cups, leaf cups, something like that. So you're at least not getting a kind of a dirty looking vessel to drink it out of. Otherwise it's kind of like going like a pirate canteen or something like that. They got some dirty glass. It's all opaque. You just don't really want to drink out of it. So yeah, he asked Prabhupada for the elixir of Krishna prema, love of God, which again is the selfless goal of loving God without asking for anything in return. It's one of the reasons why we worship Krishna as a child. Because if you worship Krishna as your father, it's kind of hard not to ask him for stuff. When you talk to your father or mother, a lot of times you ask him for things. Sometimes I'll call my mom or dad, they'll go ahead and they'll pick up the phone, oh, what do you need? Their understanding is that's the nature of my phone call to them. I'm always calling them for something. No, I'm just calling to say hello. Are you sure you don't need anything? It's the nature of our relationship, because from the time I was born, they were giving me stuff. And so it's natural that they're always wondering what I need. And even if I say I don't need anything, they're always like, are you sure you don't need something? So if you think of God as your parent, male or female, mother or father, likely you're going to ask for something. Our goal of being loving God and not asking for anything in return is reflected in our tradition by us worshiping Krishna as a child. Because when you go to a child, you never ask them, I need something. You never say, I need something, please give it to me. When you go to a child, you think of what can I do to help you? How can I be of service to you? And so our goal of loving Krishna is reflected in the form of God that we choose to worship, because it creates an environment where you can ask what you can do. Ask not what you can do for your country. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. It's a famous part of John F. Kennedy's speech, his State of the Union speech. Very, very famous speech. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. This sort of selflessness, asking to be of service, a long history of being appreciated in even in a nationalistic sense, what to speak of in a spiritual sense. So anyway, he asked, I'd like to get this elixir, this tonic. I know that you make many potions. So you please tell me, how will I get this elixir, this rasayam, which is the Sanskrit for tonic of Krishna prema, of love of God. And Prabhupada said, I don't know, I don't have it, but I know the formula for it. It was Prabhupada's equally witty answer. It was a witty question, and then Prabhupada trumped him with an ultra witty answer. Like one time, Prabhupada was going on a talk show, and the talk show host was famous for arguing and trying to do kind of hot takes where he would ask his guests questions that they couldn't answer. You follow? Anyway, Prabhupada went on the talk show. So his disciples were telling him, don't go. Prabhupada says, okay, I'll be fine. So he got on the talk show, and the talk show host, whose name escapes me, it was before my time. It was in the 60s. So by the time I was, a kid growing up in the 70s, the talk show was done. And the whatever you call him. What do you call him? Host. Yeah, it's a talk show host, so you call him a host. The host asked Prabhupada, his first question was, your country is very poor. You have such a high death rate. You've come here. What do you think you can teach us? Super racist question. Like, that stuff will get you fired from, it's like, you can't get away with that stuff nowadays, but this was the 60s when civil rights was just a new idea. So he asked Prabhupada this, and Prabhupada said, I think the death rate is the same in all countries. It's 100%. And the guy was stunned. He didn't know what to say. So he had a female hostess, co-host. And so she jumped in to save him. It's kind of an eye candy thing where you have an attractive, younger female hostess, and then people would watch your show because they'd want to see your attractive hostess. We now have weather girls on the, I don't know if they actually still have that. I don't watch the news, but they used to have weather girls. And then they probably have weather boys now. They probably figured that one out. But he had an attractive co-hostess. And so she had to jump in to save the main guy who just got floored by Prabhupada out the gate. And she said, why do you shave your head? And Prabhupada, just without missing a beat, goes, why do you shave your legs? She was on her knees. Why do you shave your legs? And she was speechless. And then Prabhupada said, better cool head, warm legs for spiritual life. That was it. That was done. She was finished. It's like, like sometimes you see this, like you'll see like somebody in a fight with two people, and they'll punch one, he goes down. When they punch the other one, he goes down, and it's like nobody left. So that happened, Prabhupada, right out the gate in the first 30 seconds of the interview, floored both of them. And then the guy came back. He kind of got up off the canvas and managed to muster defense. And he said, what will happen if everybody in the world takes to your message? And Prabhupada said, do not worry. There will always be fools like you who will not understand. And that was it. They were done. And then they just let Prabhupada say whatever he wanted to.
He gave his speech. He just gave a lecture on Krishna consciousness, left, and his disciples were just floored by how well Prabhupada had done. And then Prabhupada said, Prabhupada has like these wittyisms. I mean, this stuff's recorded. It's not like we're just making this up anecdotally. Prabhupada was probably the most well-recorded individual on planet Earth during the 11 years from 1966 to 1977 when he started the Hare Krishna movement, because his culty disciples followed him around with a tape recorder and he let them. And so he was being recorded 18 hours a day. He wrote thousands of letters. We got all of those because they made carbon copies of them. All of his books were spoken into a dictaphone, so we have those recordings. He had multiple conversations a day with people. All those were recorded. He went on a morning walk every day. That was recorded. He gave class every day. Those are recorded. And so you've got, just tens of thousands of hours of recordings of Prabhupada's life and times for an 11-year period. Anyway, so Prabhupada left, and his disciples were, floored by what he'd done. And they were, giddy and ecstatic and what have you. And Prabhupada says, this is a special dispensation for small children and old men. We can go anywhere and we can say anything, but you cannot do. Which is, again, is another ultra witty, super cool statement to make. That showed he wasn't taking himself too seriously either. And he was cautioning his disciples lest they tried to imitate and botched it. One time somebody was singing somebody came in from outside, not a member of our tribe, started singing a funky kirtan. You're not supposed to sing in our temple. And the devotees came to Prabhupada and said, what should we do? Prabhupada said, go kick him in the head with boots on, which was just a figure of speech. He didn't actually mean for them to do that. He meant, go please ask him to stop. But they actually went and assaulted the guy, and they had to stop and go, oh, hey, hang on. Anyway, it was in India where you can get away with this kind of stuff. And it was in the 70s where there was definitely like the Wild West. But sometimes we would try to, either A, literally do what he said to do, or, try to imitate, and it didn't work out so well. I didn't mean that. What's wrong with you people? Then Prabhupada told another great story. He told the story of a disciple and his guru. The disciple is walking next to the guru. The guru's on a horse. The disciple's walking. And the guru drops his beads that he uses for chanting. And miles later, he says to his disciple, where are my beads? He goes, oh, you dropped them. Miles back. The guru says, why didn't you pick them up? He goes, oh, you didn't ask me to, Gurudev. So the guru goes, you fool. Anything that drops off the horse, please pick up. Set on the horse past the stool. The disciple scoops it up. Here. What are you doing? He said, anything the horse picks up, you follow? And so, there's, Prabhupada one time said, somebody wrote him 30 questions about tulsi, the sacred plant that we grow in all of our temples. And Prabhupada answered the first 5 questions. He said, for the rest of these, please just use your common sense. He says, and if you don't have any, please find somebody who has some and ask them. Anyway, so Prabhupada was quite witty. And so he responded back to this person's witty question. Please give me that tonic. Oh, great pharmacist, prove to me what a great pharmacist you are. Please give me Krishna Prana. It manifested the humility of the person asking the question, because he's saying, I don't have it. So he's making himself out to be a beggar. He's glorifying Prabhupada. I think you have it. I think you're advanced. But he's also doing a little witty thing with Prabhupada being a pharmacist. And there's also a little challenge in there, kind of, sparking a conversation. And so Prabhupada's response was, I don't have it. I don't have that elixir. Alas. Hi, which is like alas. I don't have it, but I know the formula. And then Prabhupada gave the formula, which is kind of the most famous verse in the Hare Krishna movement. If you look at us as a 5-century-old renaissance of bhakti, and you don't go back to our multi-thousand-year-old scriptures, and you look at, more medieval sources, then this verse would definitely be number 1.
So the verse is, Trinat api sunichena. Trinat api sunichena. Nietzsche means low. Like if you call somebody Nietzsche, you're calling them a servant. It means low. Trinat api. Even more than the grass. With humility. Sunichena means with humility. It's in what's called the instrumental case. In this Sanskrit declension of nouns. Sunichena, with humility. Trinat, than grass, api, even more than grass. So when you step on grass, what happens? Bounces back up. Right? You step on grass, it bounces back up. So more than that, just no ego whatsoever. Never just standing up. More than the grass, laying down. Terror Eva Sahishnuna. With tolerance. Sahishnuna means with tolerance. Terror Eva, like a tree. Trees are tolerant because they give you fruits, they give you shelter from the sun, they give you wood for building houses, and they ask you for nothing in return. And even you cut a tree, hit a tree, it never protests, never moves. So with humility, like a tree. Excuse me, with tolerance, like a tree. And then with humility, more than grass. Amanina manadena. Without wanting respect for oneself, while giving respect to others. All these words are in what's called the instrumental. By doing this, by not asking for respect for yourself, by giving respect to others. Kirtaniya sada harihi. You will be able to always chant the name of Hari, of Krishna. Kirtaniya sada, always you'll be able to do kirtan of Hari. So if you do these four things, if you're humble more than grass, tolerant like a tree, give respect to others, expect no respect in return, those four things, then you'll be able to do the last one, which is always chant the name of Krishna. That's not actually a direct answer to the question, how do I get love of God? That's an answer to the question, how can I always chant Hare Krishna? Did you follow this? And we're about to, in 5 days, Kartik starts. It's our holy month of the year. And it's on the 19th. Maybe it's less than 5 days. It's 3 or 4 days. And then we chant every day, japa. Many of us chant 16 rounds a day, every day, which is 1,728 mantras, which is 25,000 names of Krishna, which means over a month we'll chant 750,000 names of Krishna, the average month in the life of a devotee. And so we chant every day, and then we track our chanting for the month of Kartik. And we encourage people to chant who don't normally chant. And we encourage people who are chanting to chant more, to come up to a standard, a higher standard, to knock it up a notch. We do it every year. And generally speaking, our community, our little community of Hare Krishna devotees, we generally speaking chant 100 million names of Krishna in the month of Kartik every year. And we were going to have people today like take down your numbers, and we keep track of it, and we have it online, and we give people beads, we teach them how to chant, we make a big deal out of it. And for us, it's as important as raising money for the temple, because people are donating the name of Krishna. They're chanting the name of Krishna, and we think that's the greatest donation somebody can give. And so we ask for donations of Krishna's names, and they don't cost any money. You just have to take the time to chant. But somebody could legitimately ask, they could ask, why is it that we always want to chant Krishna's name? You follow? Why is it that we always want to chant Krishna's name?
That's not actually answered in the verse. The qualifications for always chanting are in the verse. The result of the qualifications, which is that you can always chant, is in the verse. But what's the result of always chanting? That's not in the verse, it doesn't tell you. That answer comes in the next verse. What's the result of always chanting? The next verse, also super famous. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim kavitam. Not wealth, not followers, not beautiful poetry. Bhagavadgita kamaye. I don't desire any of these things, O Lord. Jagadish is the name for Krishna. Kamaye, not kamaye. I don't desire this. What do I desire? I don't desire not dhanam, no wealth, not janam, no followers, na sundarim kavitam, no beautiful poetry. Beautiful poetry was a big deal in those days. Like aesthetic beauty was a big deal. Mama jamani jamani shwadhe bhavata bhaktya haituki tvai. Life after life, to you, my Lord, let there be causeless devotion. Ahaituki bhakti. Love without any other cause. Let it just be life after life that I have. Let there be causeless devotion to you. In other words, that's the only thing I want. I don't want these other things. All I want is causeless devotion. You follow this? And by saying life after life, it also indicates I don't even care if I become liberated. Let me take birth again. I don't care. Just let me always love you, Krishna. Remember I mentioned we love Krishna as a child. Remember I mentioned the goal of our tradition is selfless love of God, not asking what you can get, but what you can give. So the result of chanting all the time is you start to feel like this. But then somebody could legitimately ask the question, why is it that by chanting all the time, I start to feel like this? I think that's a reasonable question. You guys think it's a reasonable question? So normally we quote this verse in isolation from the context of it. It's a famous verse. And normally we quote this verse. We're told to string this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it around our neck. So some Hare Krishna devotees, they carve this verse into Tulsi wood and then they wear it as a necklace. I even know one devotee who had this verse written around, he's got the verse. I even know one devotee who's got this verse written on, tattooed on his neck. And it's strung on the thread of the holy name. So there's like little flowers that come with the words of the verse. And then the thread going around his neck is the Hare Krishna mantra. And he had it tattooed on his neck. He passed away 2 years ago. Old devotee, in his 70s when he passed away. His name was Korma Rupa Prabhu. Lived in India for many, many decades. But he took it so seriously. He took this 500-year-old statement and he had somebody tattoo the Hare Krishna mantra on his neck and then the verse on little Tulsi leaves around his neck. And many devotees actually wear this as jewelry. I even know the one who tattooed it on his neck. So it's not like, this isn't like small time. Like we actually take this stuff seriously. Of course, getting something tattooed isn't really an indication that you take something seriously. People get all sorts of nonsense tattooed on their body that they don't really take seriously. Like, what is that? Just some random thing, yeah. So people get all sorts of stuff tattooed on their body that they're not actually end up taking that seriously. But for us, the stuff is serious. So, can I get the elixir of love for Krishna, pure love for Krishna? I don't have it, but I have the formula. What is that formula? Chanat api sunichena, this verse. Then somebody could ask, how is that an answer to my question? And then the answer is, because if you always chant, you will give up your material desires
And you will always want to make noise in the kitchen during class. Because if you always chant, then you'll give up your material desires. You'll stop asking what God can do for you, and you'll start asking what you can do for Krishna. But then somebody could ask, why is it that by always chanting Krishna's name, I will give up my material desires and I will just want to love God selflessly? I think it's a reasonable question. To get the answer to that question, we have to go to the preceding verse. We went to the subsequent verse, but there's also value in going to the preceding verse. Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. Nam Nam Bahuda, your various names. Akari, they're manifested. Nija Sarva Shaktis, with all of your power. This is an important part of our theology, that the name of God is holy, and that by associating with the name of God, by chanting the name of God, you're actually associating with God. Because although words and names are merely symbolic in this world, like if I say water, will it quench my thirst? The obvious answer is no. But spiritual things do not suffer from a distinction, the semiotic distinction between the symbol for something and the actual thing. The actual thing, water, is different than the word water. The sun is different than the actual sun. The word sun is different than the actual sun in the sky. The word money is different than the actual physical item, money, gold, etc. Words in this world are merely symbolic in that they are a convenient way to refer to something. But those words are not necessarily innately related to, in any kind of fundamental way, the thing that they represent and symbolize. Do you guys follow that? Okay. We're saying Krishna's name is not like that. Shh. We're saying Krishna's name is not like that. We're saying Nama Nami Noa Babe, that there is no difference between the name and the person who's been named. And that God, as an absolute being, is not fettered by all sorts of physical laws that govern his existence. Therefore, Krishna can be everywhere and in everything and also beyond everything. Krishna can. Forgive me. Just, there's like a certain level I can talk at with interruptions, but then at a certain point, I can't. Can you close that door for me? Let me start again. Although the term water is different than the item water, and if you say the word water, you will not quench your thirst. We do not conceive of Krishna's name like that. Our understanding is that Krishna is an absolute being who's not under, for instance, the law of gravity. Tell them to stay out. No more people coming. Keep them outside for the rest of class. Thank you. Like at a certain point, the math is too much for me to do with the interruptions. Okay. In general, we use language to refer to things as a convenient way to communicate with one another. Please get me a glass of water. is a way for me to signal to you to go and get me a glass of that wet liquid stuff that we both agreed is called water, and to put it in that thing that we both agreed is called glass. But the glass and the water that goes into the glass of water is not actually the same or innately related in any way, shape, or form to the word glass and the word water, which is why any language could have anything. And we can make up a new language and say, give me a 1 and a 2. And you know that 1 means water and 2 means in a cup. That's because language is merely symbolic. We do not feel that way about Krishna's name. We think nama nami no abed, that there's no difference between Krishna's name and Krishna. Therefore, when you chant Krishna's name, Krishna is quite literally dancing on your tongue. That this is one of the miraculous features of reality, that God is never more than a song, a word away from being present in your life. That you can invoke divinity anytime, anywhere, in any situation. And there is no force in reality that can block your instant communion with divinity, save and except for yourself and your willingness turning away from the absolute who's with you at every moment. You guys following this? Now, how do we get there? Well, God is an absolute being. That means God is not affected by laws that affect us. For instance, the law of entropy. God doesn't grow old. The law of contradiction. You can't be in 2 places at once. God can, because he's unlimited. God's not affected by the law of gravity. God, in fact, is the source of the law of gravity. And so we conceive of our existence as being governed by certain fundamental forces, societal forces. The very nature of an absolute being is that that being would not be governed by any of those forces. So there's a natural distinction between a name and a thing. But in the case of divinity, that natural distinction has no reason to exist. And therefore, Krishna can very reasonably and logically be within his name. And in fact, an all good and all powerful deity would make himself available in his name. And that doesn't mean other religions can't have their own name of God and make the same exact theological claims we make. In fact, they do. That's why they do the hallowed be thy name thing. It's not like we're the only guys who ever came up with this, but in our tradition, this is what we say. Therefore, the full verses that we're talking about are these 3 verses in succession. Oh, and then the rest of the verse says, Nam namakari bahuda nijasara shaktis chatra arpita niyamita smarne nakala. You've placed yourself, all your potency within that name. Niyamita smarne nakala. Niyamita smarne nakala. And therefore there's no obstruction. There's no question of time, place, or circumstance. There's no rules. You can just cry out the name of Krishna at any point, ever, even just in your mind. And you're present with divinity. Tasadrisha tavakripa bhagavama mapi. Tadrisha kripa. Tavisha kripa. Kala, why am I blanking out? Nam nama kadi bahunadi savashakis tachapitanyam tasmane nakala. Etadrisi tavakripa bhagavama mapi. Etat drishi. This such is bhagavama mapi kripa. Such is your mercy number. Your mercy is so great that you have invested your name with your full energy, such that there is never any blockage, and anybody anywhere for all time is able to invoke and commune with divinity simply by crying out. Because you're an absolute being, because you're omnipotent, because you're all powerful, because you're all good, you've created the universe in this way, where the distinction between the name and the named, between the symbol and the thing, doesn't exist in relationship to you. You're always available to people, and all they need to do is cry out, even in their minds, and you're present. That's your mercy. Durdaivam idrisam ihajani nam raga. But alas, such is my misfortune,
Attraction for your names was not born in me. I'm not attracted to chanting Krishna's names. It doesn't come easy to me. I want to read newspapers, or watch TV, or talk about nonsense, political affairs, and whatever's going on in the world. I don't want to cry out to you. I'm not attracted to doing that. I put it off. I fall short. Even when I do it, I don't do it sincerely. You feel the poet? It's a beautiful, beautiful verse. My Lord, your mercy is such that you've invested your name with all of your energy, such that anybody can commune with you directly at any moment. That's your infinite mercy. And there's no rules for you. And what's wrong with me? That despite having that incredible dispensation and incredible miraculous good fortune of existing in a world created by an all-good, all-powerful deity who's available for the price of a song at any moment, I still don't want to chant my rounds. What's wrong with me? Oh, I'm not humble. I'm not tolerant. I don't give respect to others. I want respect for myself. That's the problem. So let me get rid of that, thinking the world owes me something. Let me get rid of that entitlement. I think I live in a world where everything is due to come to me. And let me live in a world where I'm actually grateful for what's been given to me. Let me look at the world that I live in. Let me look at the world and realize, wow, like what did I do to deserve consciousness? What did you do to deserve to be conscious? Zero. What did you do to deserve air and water and sunlight and the water cycle and photosynthesis? What did you do to deserve the capacity to love and think and fathom? Nothing. These are just gifts that everybody was given. We live in a miraculous wonderland filled with beautiful things that we never stop for a moment to think about. And if we did, we would naturally feel grateful. The result of feeling grateful is we wouldn't be thinking the world owes us anything. We'd be thinking we were done a great favor by being in this world. We'd stop looking for respect from others. We'd start giving respect to others, seeing how everybody's really an emissary of Krishna to teach us a lesson in life, even so-called enemies. We become incredibly tolerant, incredibly humble, which really just means we'd see things for what they are. And then the result of that and being aware of the munificent and magical, miraculous gift of Krishna's name is we would chant all the time. And as a result of communing with divinity and getting our cup filled with Krishna, then we'd be able to say sincerely, I don't want wealth, I don't want followers, I don't want fame, I don't want this, that, and the other thing. I really just want to serve you, Krishna. That's really all I need. So these three verses are actually meant to be read in unison, and they lead from one to another, and they form a very complete picture of our theology, of our philosophy, and of our primary practice. And so shortly, temple room will fill up because we're going to be serving food, and that's what happens. And we'll start collecting japa cards from people. We'll go around the room, we'll have people commit to chanting japa. And then you guys can join in with us, and we can offer 100 million names to Krishna over the next month. And it doesn't cost you anything except for a little bit of your time and a little bit of your energy. And it's the most valuable thing to us. It's the most valuable thing to you. And that's glorified in these verses. And there's a warm-up for that. There's a warm-up for that. We're going to do a little kirtan now. You can all rise up and do some kirtan. Thank you very much.